It's been 16 long years since South Africa competed at a FIFA World Cup. But on Thursday night in Mexico City, Bathathe Bafana will be on the grandest stage of them all once more. Kickoff is 9 o'clock. The stadium is Mexico City Stadium. And South Africa and Mexico will, as they did in Johannesburg all the way back in 2010, open the tournament. Who, of course, could forget that magical day at Soccer City? Who could forget that strike from Siphiwe Tshabalala that shook the African earth? It was one of those moments where you knew exactly where you were, who you were with, and how you felt. Remarkably, Bathathe Bafana hosting Mexico in 2010 and this Thursday's highly anticipated opener take place on exactly the same date, June 11th. You couldn't script it any better. The 2010 World Cup might not have worked out for Bafana in terms of results, but the spectacle as a whole must go down as one of the greatest South African sporting moments in history. Depending on who you talk to, many consider it to have been one of the great FIFA World Cups in history as well. So why does it feel that, just maybe, this time around, the buzz isn't quite there? Are South Africans as invested as they were 16 years ago? The wait's been long enough for Bafana, so we really should be. This is Lloyd Burnard, Sports Editor of News24. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. Why is the 2026 FIFA World Cup in Mexico and the USA something that should command your attention? And I'm joined in our Cape Town studios now by my esteemed colleague Tashreeq Vardien, soccer writer at large. And we don't have the good gig, Tash. Jubs is in Mexico and the States, and he's following Bafana on the ground. We're doing the dirty work here in the studio. But how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing liquor, man. Apart from, the usual Cape winter that's coming through nice and easily. But yeah, excited for this tournament.
Jubs' coverage, you can see it all on news24.com. He's doing such a fantastic job for us following Bafana ahead of their opener against Mexico on Thursday. I mean, his stuff has been incredible, don't you think?
Yeah, I think that's what we're always going to get from Jubs. Something that's very personal, but also clarity in every reporting that he does. Excited to see and hear what more is coming from him down in Mexico.
Listen, talk to us about Bafana, because I was saying a bit earlier, it's the first time obviously in 16 years that we see South Africa on the grandest stage of them all. A team that historically has been relative minnows on the international stage, but things got pretty dark for a while there after, probably early 2000s. Things were still okay, and then we hosted the World Cup in 2010. But after that, it's been a pretty grim period. Obviously failed to qualify for any World Cup since. I think one or two AFCONs that we've missed out on qualifying for as well. And no major silverware. But suddenly, the last 5 years under Coach Hugo Bruce, things are looking a bit more positive. Just your take on where we are. South Africa's not going to win the World Cup. No one's really expecting that. But, it seems like there's reason to believe that, why not a first ever knockout, get to the knockout stages for the first time in your history? I mean, what's your general viewpoint on Bafana at the moment and what they've achieved under Bruce? I mean, we should be quite positive, shouldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. It's been nothing short of incredible, to be honest with you, especially if we look as far back as the early 2000s. After that 2002 World Cup, things slowly but surely got more bleak and more bleak. Obviously, 2010 arrived, even though we weren't at the 2006 World Cup, which was kind of a dent in having 2 years prior announced that we're going to host our first ever World Cup on African soil. And then, your 2010 hosts are not at the 2006 World Cup. Build up to 2010, successful World Cup, first time winner in Spain, and then things just got more bleak and more bleak for South African football. It's unfortunate that when we talk about Bafana, we can't ignore the fact that we have an association by their own, lack of a better term, that are really bad at their jobs, but somehow, I would say in the past 5 years, you have to also pat him on the back at the same time with Danny and his team for sort of getting it right in terms of bringing in Hugo Bruce. And especially over these past 5 years, when he comes out with a worldview from an outside world point of view and giving Bafana a sense of structure, a sense of discipline. No one was short of not feeling his wrath when it comes to him saying things like it is, whether it's the media, whether it's SAFA, whether it's the players. And I think it sets a standard for South African football that was missing for so long. just so that the players could come to the table, because that's what essentially that we needed in this past 5 years. The talent is there, but the discipline and the standards that needed to be set at a national level, if I could just bring in the Springboks here, as well as for the Proteas, was often fallen short, but eventually captured that WTC title almost 2 years ago. We can speak about the women's cricket as well. The levels that had to increase in order for them to get into semi-finals, to get into finals. Now we see that with Bafana Bafana. Obviously, Springboks have died at the highest level. But those are just examples that where I see Bafana in, once they put a structure forward, there's something that they can build towards, which is a team culture. And we've seen that now, having gone to AFCON semi-finals, claiming bronze, Bronwyn Williams on the continental stage, having been nominated for Ballon d'Or as well and finishing 9th all over the world, then being nominated and winning African Goalkeeper of the Year.
Yeah.
We're seeing Mamelodi Sundowns doing well on the African stage as well. Orlando Pirates, winning the league. So things have slowly but surely gone on the right track ever since Hugo Bruce has been in that hot seat. And it's not the easiest job. It's sort of been like this poison chalice for every coach that has been in that seat. Even if the likes of Pitso Mosamani that was there, Gordon Eagleson, nothing, really, which was our two or three greatest coaches in our country. But we needed someone from the outskirts to come in and just set the record straight. And it's been a healthy course to this World Cup, which I'm not the only South African that's pretty excited for it. I think everyone else is, but with good reason. There's still room for improvement, though.
So reason to be optimistic if you're a South African fan. Tash, talk to us a bit about the format. It's the first time that we're going to have 48 teams competing in a World Cup. And what that means really for South Africa is that it's good news. We're in the tournament. We might not have been if it's 36 teams. I think it allows more obviously nations to qualify. More African nations now have a shot at actually getting into the competition, and here we are. South Africa's in Pool A alongside hosts Mexico, South Korea and the Czech Republic. So all three tough opponents. Probably a good thing that there's no mega teams in there like your Germanys and your Spains and that kind of thing. But tell us what that means for South Africa, because we could finish third in that pool and still get through. And I mean, surely even just a spot in the last 32 and in the knockouts for the first time would be considered a successful tournament for South Africa.
Yeah, indeed. And as we know, there's 48 teams, 12 groups. Top 2 go through, and then 10 third place, 10
best third place sides. Is that right?
There we go.
No, that's not right either. It's how many groups? 12.
It's 12 groups.
12
so 10
groups. So that's 24. So 8. The top 8 third place teams will go through to
and that's why, ladies and gentlemen, we are here as journalists.
Yeah, maths and journalists is not a good combination.
But that's sort of the gist of it all, and that's the kind of window that, not that Bafana need, but it's sort of like a cushioning to say, look, if we don't make that top 2, there is a possible third place, and 4 points could certainly get a team through to the knockout round, and it would be it would be absolutely bonkers, incredible for South Africa to do that. We know Banyana were the first nation to do so at a World Cup, and Bafana would only be the second, and it would be the first time the men's has done that on this scale. And it would be nothing short of incredible. They could see it through. I don't know if they're going to get anything against Mexico in that opening match. It's going to be massive. They will get something from South Korea, either a win or a draw, in my opinion, and then obviously Czechia or whatever comes from there, a point. But it's this first game I'm more worried about than anything else, in a sense of, will the occasion be too much? Have they been together long enough leading up to this World Cup? A lot of things that has happened. So this first match is the most important one, I would say. If we could get a draw, I'd be extremely happy about it, but even a victory would be, something that would be perhaps too far to reach, given, our incapabilities to put away our scoring chances, which has been our Achilles heel for forever.
Yeah. I think what's really cool about, tournaments like this and South Africa being there is just the massive game feel. You look back to 2010 and we all know what happened on June 11, Soccer City 2010 and the Chabalala goal. But, when you see South Africa on that stage in those big moments, I mean, that's what makes these things so special. I was watching some footage on the TV now, and they were just arriving at training, getting off their team bus, and the streets are filled with people with cameras out and smartphones, and fans are there. I mean, this is a South African national team. They're not used to this kind of attention, when they go, play against Botswana in a COSAFA Cup game or an AFCON qualifier or something like that. I mean, this is big stakes. This is the big, and they play the opener again against Mexico. So I mean, getting into a last 32 would just be epic. And you're right, as you rightly say, bonkers, because then you could have a Brazil, you could have a Spain, you could have, I don't know, who we in line to play against in the knockouts. But there's a good chance that it'll be one of those mega teams. But listen, it hasn't been all smooth sailing under Hugo Broos, and especially leading into the tournament. There's a team manager by the name of Vincent Seka who has been in the news and commanding headlines for all of the wrong reasons. Tell us about this guy. We obviously had the World Cup qualifier debacle against Lesotho when we fielded Tebogo Mokoena when we shouldn't have, because he should have been suspended, and ended up losing that game to Lesotho as a result, because we essentially had to forfeit the points. And then there was the visa debacle, South Africa late in leaving for the World Cup because, big group of the players hadn't had their visas sorted. And you spoke about it a little bit earlier in terms of how the disruptions for the preparation. But I mean, what's happened here? This guy is still there. He's the team manager. Who is Vincent Seka? And help our listeners understand exactly what's transpired under his watch.
Yeah, so Vincent Seka is the team manager, and he takes care of all logistical things within the national setup. Unfortunately, on his part, as we've seen just over a year ago, Tebogo Mokoena was meant to sit out of that World Cup qualifier against Lesotho, and he played. And then, unfortunately, FIFA and their rule book came to bite us and nearly dampened our hopes of qualifying for first ever World Cup in 16 years. Yeah. Thankfully, we did the business on the field. Unlikely for South African football team, if I could say that. Yeah. We've always needed, some form of calculation, some form of mathematics to go our way. But fortunately, this, was in our favor, and we got it settled off in the field. We know Sports Minister Gaten McKenzie was going in hard at SAFA for this massive error, and only to subsequently either retract or soften the blow and said that he's apologized. And even Hugo Broos came out to say that Seka has apologized and we move forward. They're going to America, and we'll find out what happens in the next couple of months. And reports then later came out a week or so later that at the end of this tournament, at the end of the Hugo Broos regime, that Vincent Seka himself would contract will come to an end. But obviously, sometime last week, we had the unfortunate news of, I think it was 4 or 5 Bafana players that visas had an error on, and it did not arrive in time, alongside, the famous Midnight Express, Helman Makalele, the Bafana assistant coach.
Yeah, he was the last to leave.
He was the last to leave, exactly. Because I think Bafana, the whole team left 24 hours later when they were meant to leave. And then Helman Makalele left, I think, 2 days later than the initial plan. Slight speed bumps, but I think those kinds of things, if you in the Bafana setup, you kind of prepare for those kinds of things to happen. And it's not a nice thing to say, but it's a kind of thing that I guess all South Africans sort of deal with in the time. Yeah. We don't immediately look towards that end of the tunnel. We're looking for potholes along the way because somewhere down the line, something has to happen.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate.
Very, very South African of us, the way we've gotten to the World Cup.
Yeah, I mean, you can speak about an Olympics team, you can speak about a Springbok team, a Proteas team. There's something always down the line for South African national team that we have to deal with. And I guess for us journalists, we can speak more often and open about that because we either on the ground like Jabulo is or whoever is, covering a major sporting event. Yeah. These kinds of things happen. It's unfortunate. It doesn't, always run smoothly, but we lose a couple of days out of that, and hopefully whatever comes out of that, we're even more hardwired for when Thursday 9 p.m. arrives.
Look, we can laugh about it, on the surface, but I mean, the reality is, and I'm sure everyone will agree, that it's just not acceptable for an elite football team that has sacrificed so many hours and hours and so much investment to get to this tournament, and then we, kind of don't dot the I's and cross the T's with something as seemingly simple as securing visas. But having said that, visas have been an issue across the tournament, not just for Bafana Bafana, and we've seen the bizarre story of a Somalian referee who, seemingly had all of his visas and papers in order and was still turned away at the airport and sent back home, which is, kind of crazy. Look, it's not just about Bafana, Tash. There's, some incredibly good teams and special players. And we speak about the footballers of this generation and Ronaldo and Messi, and they're here again, probably one last time, the two of them. Luka Modric probably playing his last one as well. But how special is that? I mean, we were talking a little bit before this thing started about the moments. Every World Cup is decided on these incredible moments, and there's certainly going to be a few more. I mean, just the sheer quality of the football on offer. I mean, this is the absolute pinnacle of global sport, really. And even if you're not a diehard football fan who's watching and following leagues every week in, week out, the FIFA World Cup is certainly something that you stop and pay attention to.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I guess for me, my earliest memory when it comes to the World Cup, it's seeing the images of Maradona in '86, it's seeing the Brazilian team in '94, it's seeing, Benny McCarthy in 1998 scoring that first World Cup goal. It's seeing Zinedine Zidane, dismantle a Brazilian team in '98. It's seeing Zinedine Zidane, in 2006 for that Materazzi head, but seeing that 2002 Brazilian team just cause havoc as they usually do, having done so 5 times. It's seeing, 2010, the Shakira song, that's Waka Waka, that's so massive. It's most likely the greatest football anthem ever. Yeah, we saw Mbappe, yes, the hat-trick in the final. So these World Cups gives us moments, and sometimes it's so reflective of us as a society where we hang on, we cling on to these moments, especially here in South Africa. We can speak about the '95 World Cup, the '96 AFCON. We can speak about Penny Haynes as well. The list goes on and on. But in this World Cup, where I see it, a moment arriving, unfortunately, it most likely will happen off the pitch, given the political state as to what's happening in North America as well. Obviously, with the Iran team and the Iran national team also going through their own stuff, having not, obviously, because of the Middle East war and what's going on in the States, they've been pushed over and moved to either move their base to Mexico. So those kinds of things. I mean, 4 years ago, we were speaking about how, we associated football or sport with alcohol, and Qatar had to lower their regulations to bring in alcohol into the country, or at least not have alcohol within the stadium. But there was bars, I think like a kilometer or 2 from the stadium, where fans can indulge in alcohol. So those kinds of things we'll find, in moments. And who's going to steal, the moments on the field? Ronaldo, hopefully, for some fans. We've already seen Messi lift the World Cup 4 years ago. I think for most, football fans, they want to see Ronaldo do that. The Portuguese team is fantastic. We know Bruno had a great season with Manchester United. We know the PSG midfield of João Neves and Vitinha did fantastic under Luis Enrique.
Sure, yeah, they do. I was looking at some odds the other day, and they actually are up there with one of the favourites to win the thing, and that would be incredible if it was Ronaldo. I'll tell you, one of the World Cup moments that you didn't mention that sticks close to my heart as a young 12-year-old Man United fan, obsessed with every one of those Red Devils, was the Beckham kick, the red card 1998, when he just flings a boot at Diego Simeone, gets sent off, and hearts break around the world as the golden boy is sent down the tunnel. Listen, Tash, what are your predictions here? I mean, in terms of internationally, I mean, who do you think are the best bet to win this thing? If you look at, you obviously follow world football incredibly closely, and having seen the seasons these guys have all come out and the teams they've all put together, who do you think is the favorite in your eyes to win this thing? And then also just tell us realistically what you think Bafana can achieve.
I think obviously we mentioned now Portugal, we mentioned, defending champions, Argentina, they'll be in the mix, as well as Germany. For some reason that always there, it hasn't always clicked for them in the past 2 World Cups. But hopefully things can come right this time around. I think for some reason, they're not even a dark horse, but their potential is so great, being defending European champions. But Spain, Lamine Yamal, I think he's like 18, 19 years old now. This is his first World Cup. And that's immense. We've already seen teenagers at World Cups before. Wayne Rooney, we've seen Ronaldo, Cristiano, we've seen Messi, we've seen many names before. But I think Lamine Yamal, I think they have the chance to go out and go full strength and hopefully get their second World Cup. From a Bafana point of view, I'm praying for a round of 32 place. They have a good chance, as I mentioned before, against Mexico. That might just be a touch too far, but there's more than likely a victory that we can get in both Czechia and the South Korea matches. It's how we stand forward in that first match. Whether it's a defeat or a draw, it depends on how we come out of that match, and can we just get our heads back in together and, go on that match against Czechia, then against South Korea as well. It's about lifting ourselves up. South Africa are very good at creating chances. We've noticed that under Hugo Broos. I mean, I think they've played about 56 or 57 matches under Broos, and the goal average is about 1.7 goals, which is quite high for South Africa, for Bafana team. If you take that into context under previous regimes. But if they can get their scoring boots on, and hopefully we know Themba Zwane came back at the end of December last year. I know he's in the squad. He's been a forever creative spark, and if he can give us, just 6 weeks of absolute great creative football in the middle of the park, and then South Africa definitely has a chance to get out of that group.
I think it's such a good point about how they come out of that first game. It could be a draw, it could be a loss. But what you don't want is to quickly turn into the whipping boys of the group, which I think is the fear that people have. But given the world rankings and the history and the other teams in that pool, I mean, South Africa are comfortably the outsiders in that pool. So, I mean, every match that they enter, I think, would be considered underdogs in that particular match, which obviously makes them outsiders in the whole group. But how they go in that first game is almost more important than the result, because if they lose the game, then there's still, because of the format and because you can qualify by finishing third, there's still a lot to play for in the next 2 games. But you don't want to be going into those last 2 games off the back of a dismal 4-0 loss. You want to kind of come out of that game with a belief that you can, kind of hang with the big boys of the tournament. So I think that's a very good point. Thanks so much for joining us, Tash, and chatting. It's going to be such a cracking tournament. We can't wait to bring it to you. We've, as I said, gotten Jabulo Nkidi, the greatest football writer in the country, in my not so biased opinion, who's with Bafana at the World Cup. He'll be in Mexico for the opener. Then he'll be jetting off to the States for game 2, and then I think back to Mexico for game 3. And visit news24.com. We've got our special World Cup site where you'll get all of your results, fixtures, logs. We've got our dedicated World Cup section. We're going to have columnists and analysis videos coming through from the Bafana camp. So just action-packed. And for all of your World Cup news, visit news24.com.